All right, everybody, welcome. Thanks for tuning in. We have a very special guest today. I have Borge Fagerli on, and thank you, Borge, for coming on. And how's it going? And did I pronounce your name correctly?
Yeah, it was pretty close. It's one of the better ones. Most
Yeah.
English-speaking people just say like Borg.
Pronounce your name correctly.
So, but it's Børge Fagerli is my name.
Borge. Okay, cool. I listened to some interviews with you, and everybody just seems to butcher your name completely, and it's like doesn't seem that difficult. But yeah, okay. So
Yeah,
let's just, I want to go through a whole bunch of really cool topics with you. And so I'm just going to jump right in. So
sure.
first of all, please, let's just start with your little introduction. Please tell us about your journey. How did you become the coach and fitness authority that you are today? And yeah, just who inspired you? How did you get here?
Well, it's kind of a long story, but I'll try to give you the highlights. I was always very bright and like smart. I started reading when I was 4 years old and started doing math before I even started school. So I always found academic endeavors to be more easy for me than sports and physical activities. So I was kind of always the last one to be picked at the sports teams, and just always performed moderate well among all my peers. So for me, it became like this pursuit of finding the optimal way of doing things so that I could get the best results possible. And so that kind of quickly turned out to be methods. I kind of systematically just filtered out information in order to find what really worked, and if something didn't work, why didn't it work, and sort of try to individualize the prescriptions on training and nutrition. And that quickly turned out to be a very productive way to make other people the best version of themselves, like the better athlete. Um, I kind of had this mentality of almost seeking out all the underdogs, and then bringing out the best in them. So I've obviously worked with a lot of talents, but I think talent only gets you so far. You need hard work and consistency, and training smart instead of just a lot. And so I always looked up to coaches that had this systematic way of programming, and like Lyle McDonald was one of my earlier mentors, and I always admired the way he was able to filter a lot of research and synthesize methods out of that, like programs out of that. So I actually contributed to a couple of his books in the past, where I would try out different methods and see what worked, and sort of fine tune it and see if there was something that worked better. So I guess I was always the guy that wanted to find something that worked better. I wasn't satisfied with just being good enough, and basically just trying to see if there was something even more optimal for individuals. So I haven't really worked with a lot of teams. Mostly having worked with individuals, and being able to take the underdogs up into the like top tier placings. So yeah, I have quite an extensive list of world champions and European champions and Nordic and Norwegian champions on my list. That was kind of what drove me, just to find
Right.
something that worked the best. And of course, that could have broken my self-confidence completely to see that even though I found the better methods, I couldn't really excel at anything. But it just gave me this profound joy of seeing others perform at their best and winning trophies, and just yeah, becoming
Cool.
incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard you mentioned kind of, you think, I mean, that you always kind of sucked at things. Now I don't know. I've seen some pictures of you. You still have a pretty crazy physique. So I'm just curious, like when you started lifting weights, did you dream about becoming a Mr. Olympia, or what was kind of your initial idea?
No, I don't think I ever had that kind of aspirations. I just kind of wanted to look big and strong. That was my initial motivation to start lifting. I actually started on the like that Bulgarian burst training system developed by Leo Kostas, all those years ago, which was not too distant from the way I'm training today. It was high frequency, moderate volume, focus on the compound lifts. So it's kind of interesting to see how in 25 years I've basically just come full circle. But I think my aspirations was mostly just to find a better way to do things. See if I could get my lifts to go up, and my arms to grow bigger and whatever. I think they're just a process. There wasn't like any ultimate goal there. I was always just focused on the process and finding the drive within the minor details, basically.
Right. Now you obviously work with a lot of clients. You work a lot of clients online. So I'd be curious, like, how is your general kind of assessment process look like? So when someone hires you as a coach, how do you kind of determine how to approach them in your working process?
It's quite an extensive questionnaire. Nowadays, I usually just call people and talk to them, and because I can always, if I send out the client form and people send it in, you can sort of get the overall grasp of the situation. But just talking to people, I can sometimes pick up things that they didn't even consider. So that's my preference nowadays. But as far as the information goes, it's the general, age, height, weight, body fat percentage, their occupation, because that tells me something about if they're sedentary or not. But I also ask about their general activity level outside of training. You can have those hard training clients, training 1 to 2 hours per day and then just sitting on their ass the rest of the day, and that's, it's not going to burn a ton of calories. I look at stress levels because I tend to look at stress as sort of this bucket that you can fill with the stress from your general life, like your work, your family, social obligations. You have the stress from training in there. You have the stress from nutrition. I mean, bad food quality will be a negative stress factor. You have sleep quality. So I kind of assess all of these to determine how much training stress can a client actually tolerate, and is the bucket big enough to tolerate even more stress from the training. Yeah, and there's also like for the cybernetic fitness website where we have this artificially intelligent program generator that I work with Mene Hanselmans. We also look at wrist and ankle circumference and like digit length to determine anabolic potential, and so that's kind of an advanced type of algorithm in there that I don't really use with my online clients all that much. So those are the general ideas. I obviously also look at training history, and if they've been active and doing sports all their life. If they've been training with weights, is it like really good programs, or have they just been messing around? Their food quality, is their diet shitty? Their biorhythm, are there, night owls or morning larks? Do they get up early, go to bed early, that kind of thing? So it's kind of an interplay between all these factors, and how can we move forward? Because I don't like to just enforce a diet plan on the client. I like to see what they're doing now, and sort of just incorporate lifestyle habits and positive habit forming.
All right. Oh, I'm sorry. It just got delayed.
No, that's basically it. So, and how many days per week can they work out? Do they work out early or late? I also take that into consideration, because training in the mornings, you're not going to be as strong and volume tolerant as you can be in the afternoon and evening. And if you've had 1, 2, or 3 meals in you before you go to the gym, that's also going to be a factor. But then I just basically start out someone on a template, and a program template where I test their strength levels in all exercises and determine the intensity, like the starting loads and the sets, the volume, taking into account the frequency chosen, or what is allowed for that client. Sometimes it's not even feasible to train more than 3 days per week, so we kind of have to take that into account as well. And so then we just basically see what happens. The starting loads will determine, just a short summary of that is based on your fiber type and your training history. If I prescribe an 80% intensity, and we have determined that your 1 RM squat is 100 kilos, if I tell you to do max reps at 80 kilos, if you're like this explosive low rep kind of guy, you will end up maybe doing 6 reps. If you're one of these, cardio bunnies that I like to call them, always being really endurance oriented, you might end up doing 12 reps at 80%. So the rep range is not going to be a prescription on my end. It's going to be determined by your individual, fiber type and training history. So that kind of takes care of the individuality factor. And then we see work capacity. I prescribe number of sets. And if you have a high work capacity, you might end up getting 12, 12, 12, 12. Whereas someone with a low work capacity will maybe get 12, 8, 6, 4. And that's kind of the auto-regulation aspect, which I'm a huge fan of using in my programs.
Yeah. Cool. I was going to ask a little bit more about the client assessment, but you already mentioned a couple of really cool topics. So I'm just going to jump a little bit back and forth. So let's get into nutrition first, because you've done some great work on nutrient timing, and you wrote about the biorhythm diet that you, I think, now already mentioned. So could you first give it like a short, quick kind of overview of what makes that different from the typical sort of bodybuilding diet approach?
Yeah, where to start? This is I already wrote a book on this, so which is going to be published through an online course with our first of all, but I'm also looking at publishing a Norwegian version, which will include everything. But like the general 6 meals a day, evenly spread, bodybuilding type diet, it obviously works. I mean, we've seen that it produces incredible results in this obviously very talented and gifted bodybuilders. But for the general population, which I work with and try to produce champions from, it's a compliance issue. Just having to prepare and eat meals every 2 to 3 hours. I mean, I could never do that. I used to, like, one time in the past, but it was always a hassle. So I guess I started kind of, I also did contest diets where there were no carbs after 6 p.m. and I just felt horrible on that. I would wake up 2-3 times every night and just suffer badly, like being starving. So I kind of tried to figure out, how would the nutrient timing, was there any truth in that you couldn't eat any carbs past 6 p.m. and sleep quality obviously factored in. If you were starving, it was really hard to be in a caloric deficit. So you had to ensure that you slept well. And so all this biorhythm stuff started interesting me, and looking at how the body, the efficiency at which it digests and metabolizes the nutrients and directs them towards anabolism or lipolysis. And it kind of became apparent that when you're desynchronized, when your circadian rhythm, which is governed by the input from light and meal timing, is synchronized or desynchronized, all this hormonal, the hormonal environment in your body is going to be suboptimal, and it leads to a host of metabolic syndromes and diseases, which is popularly referred to by Daniel Lieberman in his excellent book, The Story of the Human Body, as a mismatch disease. So the circadian desynchronicity is actually a very important factor in the modern lifestyle diseases, both the cardiovascular, metabolic, and the cancer incidence or rates that we've seen just explode. But most of all, the obesity rates. Whereas having everything synchronized, having the meals synchronized with daylight, and eating the proper foods at the proper time, it basically makes everything just work a lot better. So instead of this whole black box view of the body as input-output, you just kind of open up the box and see what's going on inside, and so you can start determining what the body is actually doing with those nutrients, so you can build muscle and burn fat at the same time, because those are independent processes, whereas people try to say that, well, it's the same thing. Well, no, it's not, because your body is not a calculator. It's an evolutionary organism that's it tries to protect you. It tries to preserve lean mass, and fat is important energy storage for survival. So you kind of have to start working with the body and not against it. So basically the short version of it is that fats are metabolized more efficiently for energy in the early parts of the day, whereas having higher fat meals later in the day and closer to bedtime seems to interfere with a digestive and metabolic process, and there's a high probability of it being directed towards fat storage instead of burnt off as energy. Obviously, this can be influenced by how hard you're training and when you're training. So there are ways to offset that. Protein intake, generally, your body is more sensitive to protein intake in the early parts of the day, and that's because you had a nightly fast. A period without nutrient intake allows the cells to increase their sensitivity. So whereas my favorite metaphor of this is just tapping the finger on your forehead. At the beginning it's really sensitive, but over time it becomes numb. And that's what happens with protein intake as well. The amino acids, if you keep bombarding the cells with amino acid signaling, the cells shut down, they become numb, so they don't respond to the signal. Whereas early in the day, when you've had a break from the nutrient intake, your cells are really responsive to that signal. And so then later in the day, when you approach the final meal and you have a fasting period ahead, then having a whole meal or a slower digesting protein source and the higher intake, since you're at the point where where the cells are at their lowest efficiency in terms of protein synthesis, and synchronizing that with a a workout would obviously also increase the efficiency at which you can use and turn those amino acids into real muscle. So the largest meal, the most protein-rich meal should be the final meal. It should also not be too late. I generally prescribe an eating window between 7 to 9 a.m. in the morning to 7 to 9 p.m. in the evening. That's what seems to be the most optimal eating window in terms of metabolic health and what the body is doing with those nutrients. You generally just want to eat within a couple of hours after getting up, 2 to 3 hours, and you want to eat within 3 to 4 hours before going to bed, because that will allow the body to start shutting down the digestive process and start melatonin production and get the leptin release and growth hormone and all that good stuff that happens during the night to ensure that you are recovering well. Carb intake is generally just tuned to activity level. So like the first article on Biorhythm diet that I wrote, people kind of interpreted that as saying, well, you should go zero carb throughout the day and then you should basically carb load after a workout. I never said that, but I guess I was a little vague in terms of when to eat carbs, because it was from the context of having a late workout. So if you're like most people, kind of sedentary throughout the day, you don't actually need a lot of carbs. And so you can, by saving up those carbs for post-workout, you can ensure that the muscles are going to suck up all those carbs and make them into glycogen. But nowadays I'm a little more flexible. I don't really tell people to go low carb or zero carb in the early parts of the day, especially not if they're on their feet and staying active throughout the day. Then I allow some carbs there. So the meals can be really balanced throughout the day until you get to the training, where carb intake goes up. But it's also important to have some carbs in the final meal. So even if you work out in the morning, it's not going to be zero carb for the final meal either. That goes back to my experience with, it affecting sleep quality and hunger throughout the night. So it's carbs are an important driver for leptin signaling, and you want a leptin peak during the night. And it's also a Zeitgeber, which means it's one of the clock inputs to the central circadian clock. So having some carbs in the final meal can actually help you reset jet lag more efficiently if you're traveling through different time zones. But you're just generally going to see a peak of carb intake around workouts, and so that's what takes care of the nutrient timing aspect of it. I also tune this to how advanced someone is. So a beginner is going to have some pretty even balanced meals. It's not going to be some huge differences in caloric intake, but whereas when you get more advanced, this anabolic window, it shortens. So a beginner can grow muscles for 24 to 48 hours after a workout. When you get to the intermediate level, that sort of anabolic window is going to be open for maybe 24 hours, 12 to 24 hours. But when you get very advanced, this window shortens all the way down to maybe 6 to 12 hours. And we've seen some research showing how delaying caloric intake by 6 hours almost nullified, almost eliminated the muscle growth potential. And I mean, they even had standard meals in there. It was the Mori et al. Study, the Asian study. But whereas having an additional carb and protein intake post-workout, immediately post-workout, dramatically improved the results, but only in the advanced lifters. The beginners, there was no difference. And
Right.
So that kind of just, in addition to a lot of other research, just confirmed the whole anabolic window theory. But what most people tend to forget when they try to make sense of nutrient timing is that they forget the level of advancement of the lifters. So yeah, so that's sort of the nutrient timing aspect of everything, and the biorhythm aspect of it as well. I actually saw noticeable improvements in body composition just by making sure that you don't eat the final meal later than 8 or 9 p.m. in the evening. It also seemed to improve sleep quality. And I actually tried some variations where some clients of mine just moved their final meal a little earlier to like 7 or 8, whereas the others were allowed to continue eating like 10 or 11 p.m. for some people. And just moving the meal earlier started at the same caloric level to reduce body fat in these clients.
Wow.
So I really found that highly interesting. And of course, digging through the research, you can kind of see how the enzyme activity sort of tended to drop in the evening. And so the body's just generally not very effective at burning fat later in the day. So you really need a hard and long workout if you want to take advantage of fat intakes and caloric intake later in the day. So that whole carb backloading thing that John Kiefer invented, that he later admitted was wrong, it just kind of falls flat on its face when you start to really understand the circadian rhythm and nutrient timing aspect of things.
Yeah, it also makes life a little bit more difficult, I think, with that approach. But but that aside, actually, one thing I wanted to ask you about is because I know you placed a lot of emphasis on living a great, awesome life while looking good. Is in terms of calorie tracking and macronutrient tracking, how closely do you monitor that in your own life, and what do you generally recommend to your clients there?
For myself, I stopped tracking probably a year ago, because the ironic thing was that when I meticulously planned and tracked everything, my results were good. But when I stopped tracking everything and just kind of became more in tune with my body and optimized my lifestyle, my staying active throughout the day, compared to sitting on my ass. Improved food quality even more, and got more of a holistic understanding of the whole aspect of nutrient and lifestyle. My results improved. I actually started dropping fat and maintaining and even building some more muscle. Inflammation went away. I used to have like a lot of joint pain, and I would respond really really hard, really to workouts in general. I would hurt everywhere. I couldn't really tolerate any volume at all. And I'm not going to say I'm totally pain free, but the difference is like night and day. So I basically just have this general idea of when to eat and the meal composition, what I'm going to eat. But the rest, I just let hunger dictate that. So before, I would eat my meal no matter what. But today, I might actually leave, half my plate of food left because I'm just not hungry anymore. So just learning how to differentiate between eating to fullness and eating until you're not hungry anymore, that was kind of a mindfuck for me. But that also improved results, and having high and low calorie days, depending on how hungry I am, also improved results dramatically. And yes, and of course the liberty. I mean, the freedom in not having to plan everything in advance. I think that was a major part of it, and making sure that food is something to enjoy, and food is a fuel, but it's not something that should be derived extreme pleasure or suffering from, the way that most people approach it. Because that sort of ends up in this starve binge cycle that so many clients that approach me are suffering from. And so with my clients, I generally have to prescribe portion sizes and meals and timing in the beginning parts of the coaching period, and that's to reprogram their circadian rhythm, because it's very often messed up and desynchronized, and to learn people to teach people how to judge portion sizes, and to see that they're getting sufficient protein and making the proper food selection and balancing in their meals. But I always prefer to transition into a more intuitive, instinctive, mindful way of eating the way I'm doing it, which is also very liberating for so many of my clients that have been locked into this calorie counting mindset. So I guess you could look at it as instead of having one overarching principle and this is what I always do, I like to have the more extreme clients becoming more moderate, whereas the clients that are always just eating whatever, whenever, I like to bring them towards the middle, towards a more strict eating schedule. So they have prescribed meal times and a certain meal setup, but it's not like overly restrictive or regulated by rules or can do and can't do, basically. But there's always sort of this programming period in the beginning. I mostly I think maybe 80% of my clients are satisfied after 4 weeks of working together. Probably 70 to 80% of my clients, because I try to teach them as much as possible while we're working together, and then leave them better than when I found them. So I give them this long list of guidelines on how to proceed on their own. But some people also prefer having a coach that can guide them through everything, so they don't have to think about it. And so I can do that too. But my style of coaching nowadays is more of a lifestyle-based coach. So, because that tends to improve everything. It's like some people have this idea in their mind that if they just do everything perfectly, they will become the champions. But I would say the champions, one of the trademarks of a true champion is the ability to listen to their body and actually self-monitor, or have a coach that sort of hold them back when they're pushing too hard, or pushing them when they are able to.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm done.
Cool. Next, actually, I was going to ask you originally about training, but since we only have kind of a short amount of time left, I definitely want to ask you about, because I read your blog and you wrote one post called "How to Be Awesome," which was a really cool post, and I heard you before mentioning that you find it important to have a life and not just limit your life to fitness. So if you could just address those points. How do you think we could live an awesome life, and also how can we synchronize looking good, lean and muscular, while also having a great, full, rich life?
Well, that's probably an hour right there of addressing all those points. But I think just the main thing to remember is that there are a lot of talented people and gifted athletes in physique or in physical prowesses. But there's only like this small minority in the world that become world champions or are able to actually live off of it. So I think just having some realistic expectations, and what you also see in the top performers is the mindset of enjoying the process. I mean, they like training. They love it. and food is often a fuel for them. It's not something that should have this overly dramatic emotional response attached to it. So there are some characteristics in there that sort of tells you whether someone is going to be a top performer or not, I think. And that's not to say that everyone should, drop all their ambitions and, just become an accountant or something. Not that accounting is the worst thing you can do, but I think just having some realism in there and looking around you and seeing that, because the single most important thing or the most important theme when you ask people on their deathbeds or when they have a terminal disease that they're about to die, I don't think anyone ever said that I wished I trained harder or stick better to my meals or worked harder, or the common theme is always, I wish I spent more time with my friends and my family and my loved ones. And I wished I saw more of the world. I experienced more of the world. Because I think we're not put here on earth to look good naked, basically. I mean, we can, but that's not supposed to be the single most important factor in our lives. I also think it's important that what you do is fun. Some people say that, well, yeah, I love training, training hard and eating chicken and broccoli, yoo-hoo, I really love it. But on the inside, they're hurting. They're usually hurting, It's not comfortable. It's just that they don't have any other point of reference. So to them, that's their world. That's their little bubble that they think, well, this is fantastic. This is awesome. This is what life is supposed to be about. That's because they haven't experienced anything else. So I think just having more points of reference will tremendously impact the way people approach what they do in their daily life. And there's actually scientific studies showing how just enjoying training increases your recovery and your results. And just having enjoyable workouts are in general tied to the success of that workout. So if you are training something that you enjoy training, you get better results after the 6 or 12-week period. Whereas if you're doing something that you really hate, then that's going to affect your results negatively. And your general view of your life and your enjoyment of life is going to affect your hunger. There was this interesting, cool study where they had two groups. One group was, two groups were going to walk a certain distance in the same time duration. One group was told that, let's go out training. And so they walked that same distance over the same time span, whereas the other group was told, hey, let's go out and enjoy the fresh air and watch the birds in the sky and, just getting some fresh air in the sun. And they both walked the same distance in the same time span. And at the end of the walk, they were given access to a lunch buffet. And the group that was training actually ate 30 to 40% more calories than the group that was just out enjoying the fresh air. And so that just goes to show the whole impact of your mental attitude towards what you're doing. That's going to affect the results you get from it, and it's going to impact how much you eat or actually feel that you need to eat. So there's this whole, people tend to think of, well, this is the physiological aspect of it and just optimizing all the variables here, that's going to make everything perfect, and then totally forget the whole mental aspect of things, where the way you process information and the way you approach your training is going to determine if this over here is actually going to work or not. So that's where I'm coming from with my whole holistic aspect and approach to both the coaching process and the way I live my own life. I spend a lot of time just trying to figure out myself and what drives me and what makes me happy, basically. because I think deep down we're all, the happiness is what we're after. And having a six-pack is not necessarily going to bring you happiness. When I was at my leanest and biggest and competing in bodybuilding, I was probably more depressed than I ever was. So that's not happiness. That's not what's going to make you happy. But people tend to think it is, and it's just a disturbed view of the world and yourself.
Shit. Yeah. That's thanks, man. That was really powerful. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I talked to Eric Helms before. I'm not sure. Great guy. Yeah, and he just said kind of similar things, like he's just so deep, and has kind of such a philosophical person, and I love that people in the bodybuilding industry just many times have these very deep thoughts about happiness and kind of the meaning of life. And I don't know if it's bodybuilding that teaches people to think that way, or it's a coincidence, or I don't know, but I just love seeing this more and more. So
yeah, I think it's more about getting out of bodybuilding, because you went through that whole process, and you've kind of gotten to see life from both perspectives. And I really got along with Eric great. We met at the AFPT convention this year, where we were both giving presentations, and I mean, we just spent the whole evening talking about life and our approach to things, and we're completely in agreement with how you should view the whole process. I mean, I just generally, Eric is really worth listening to, and reading his material. Just highly recommended.
Cool, awesome. Well, Borge, thank you very much for coming on. It's been very, very insightful, and you gave some awesome information. Just please tell people where they can find you. Yeah, maybe you have some products, books, seminars. Where can people get in contact with you?
Yeah, as most of you probably realized, I'm a wordy guy, so I have so much stuff inside this big head that I just want to get out. My Norwegian webpage is borgefagerli.no. I have an English blog, which is borgefagerli.com. It's kind of, there's not a lot of stuff going on there. It's just some of my old articles, so it's not really active. I've been putting my effort into the energy blueprint with Ari Whitten, which is the whole circadian and lifestyle aspect of light, movement, eating. Just it's going to be an awesome product, and it's we're hopefully going to launch it late January. Cybernetic Fitness, which is this artificially intelligent coach that I created with Menno Henselmans. We had to reprogram the whole thing because it's so complex that the last or the first version didn't actually work the way we intended it to. So we're hopefully also going to launch that in January. So those are the main websites you can find me at. But obviously, if you search, if you input my name in Google, you can find articles all over the internet and YouTube videos and podcasts and everything. So I've been around, so it's easy to find me.
Cool. All right, Borge, it was really a lot of fun, and yeah, thank you very much again.
Thanks for having me.